Carrie.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Although I have to go put my headset to charge downstairs, so I gotta go grab it.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I'm gonna make you a co-host just so you get that part ready. And Zach, if you're there, I'll get the recording and stuff started and then just make you host if that's okay.
Yeah, it's just me right now, Carrie, but Zach's about to join.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be right there.
No problem.
All right. Yeah.
Linda Kelly here.
Thank you, Linda, for confirming that. I will rename you. And Chair Fernandez, I did get a message from Kathy that she might be a few minutes late.
Okay. Happy Valentine's Day. Such a romantic meeting.
It's because we love the city.
Yeah, that's it. For some reason, I'm not getting credit for this. I can't believe it.
All right, I think we have a few people in the waiting room, but they are all guests, so maybe we'll just wait another minute for.
Carrie, can you hear me?
I can hear you, thank you.
I'm on a different browser because I was having technical difficulties trying to get on, but I can't see anyone. I don't know. Really a weird view. I don't know how to explain it. I was going to ask you to help me, but I guess I might need to be able to explain it to you better for you to help me.
Yeah, there's usually two views. One is the gallery where you see the Brady Bunch, and one is a speaker where you just see the person speaking.
And I don't have either of those. I'm going to try to log out and log back on.
You're
Okay.
the speaker right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I think Carrie's camera fell over. Or it turned off. There we go.
Yes,
Carrie,
I will be
remind me, do I
starting
read the script for Zoom first and then start the meeting? Do I start the meeting and then read the script?
It doesn't matter, but let me go ahead and let the participants in. We have
Okay.
A couple of consultants, applicants, and the public. I think you can go ahead and read the script. once folks have entered, and then we'll get it.
It has to be recorded though, right? So maybe I'll start the meeting and then read the script. Just to
There
make
you
sure.
go. All right. One more person entering. And Sam will turn admitting folks over to you now as we start the meeting. All right, Chair Fernandez, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, I'd like to officially start this meeting, February 14th, 2023, the Sebastopol Planning Commission meeting at 6 p.m. This meeting is being conducted after this meeting. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. Planning Commission members and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by use of Zoom as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak to the Planning Commission may do so during public comment or may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment. And with that, we will open agenda for roll call.
Thank you. We will start with Commissioner Kelly,
Here.
Commissioner Burns,
Here.
Commissioner Ottinger. Commissioner Ottinger did note that she was going to be a few minutes late this evening, so she's not yet here. Vice Chair Fritz.
Here.
And Chair Fernandez.
Here.
All right, so we have 4 folks, so we do have a quorum and we can go ahead and get started with the business.
Okay. So moving on to agenda item number 2, comments from the public on items not on the agenda. So this is for items not on the commission agenda that are related to the responsibilities of the commission. And anyone would like to make any comments, and go ahead, Planning Director, you can.
Thank you. So thank you, Chair Fernandez. If you'd like to make a comment, you can raise your hand using the Zoom feature of raising hand, letting me know in the chat, or simply unmuting your screen, showing your video and raising your hand too, if you'd like. While I look for those, I will note that we did receive one comment for an item not on the agenda, which was forwarded to the commission a couple weeks ago, shortly after your last meeting. Okay, I do not see any other members of the public wishing to speak on items not on the agenda.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and close that portion, public comment, and move on to item number 3, statements of conflict of interest. If any commissioners have any conflicts of interest with items on today's agenda. And do not see that. Okay. Moving on to item number 4, approval of minutes from November 8th, 2022. Anyone have any changes, additions to the minutes? And if not, I will be open for a motion for approval.
I move that we approve the draft minutes of November 2nd, 2022.
Okay, can I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or comments, changes? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call for vote.
Thank you. Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fritz,
Aye.
Chair Fernandez.
Aye.
The minutes are approved 4-0 with 1 absent, Commissioner Ottinger.
Okay. Moving on to item number 5 under the regular agenda items. Item 5A, sustainable transportation grant discussion.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. We have with us tonight W-Trans, which is the city's traffic consultant who is going to be helping the city with this application. The sustainable, I'll just give a brief overview and then I will turn it over to Barry Bergman, who's here to help us with this item. And just a note, what this is this is a discussion item. The city council has already directed staff to put together and submit an application. What is all included in that application is part of what tonight's discussion item is. The Sustainable Transportation Grant is a grant that Caltrans offers specifically for planning of transportation improvements, not for construction. But there's been a lot of discussion in the city about making downtown more walkable, trying to coordinate, the fact that we do have 2 highways coming through town, and how to coordinate that with Caltrans better, as well as our county county partners. So that's both Sonoma County, and I would note they are, for those of you who were engaged the last time we did the general plan update, which I think was probably kind of 2013 to 2016. The county is about to start their general plan update. And so, of course, updating their circulation plan element is an area where the city is hoping to engage in terms of how transportation in West County is coordinated. And then the other kind of stakeholder in that is SCTA, the Sonoma County Transportation Authority. They do a lot of coordination. They also coordinated and did a travel model probably about 1.5 years or so ago, using a lot of good data that they didn't have previously from GPS, Waze, a lot of them, the app kind of things, not only to know what the traffic counts were, but where people were going. And that revealed a lot about our town. I won't get into the details of that. I do want to turn it over to Barry to go ahead and talk about this item.
Great, thanks very much, Carrie. I'm Barry Bergman, I'm a planner with W-Trans, and I'm just going to provide a little bit of information. Carrie already provided a little bit about the grant itself. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then just about the project that we are putting the application together for, and then just give you an idea of kind of what's involved from another project that we worked on, just the type of product you can expect to see, and then take any questions or any items to discuss. Can I share my screen? I don't know if I have control.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry,
Okay.
let me.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Doesn't seem to want to change. Come on. There we go. So this is the title of the project: Sebastopol Main Street State Highways Sub-Regional Planning and Core Redesign. Doesn't really roll off your tongue, but it says a lot. The Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant, there's 3 different types of grants that come under that heading. The one that we are looking at is the one at the top there, the Sustainable Communities Grant. And there's a total of $30 million. This is statewide. It's an annual program, highly competitive. Out of 100 points, I think the cutoff is usually somewhere around 90. But it's tough. But I think this project really checks off a lot of the boxes that they like to see. It's particularly the fact that it's multimodal, and it weaves in the land use and the economic piece. So I think it does make for a really strong candidate in that way. This was included in your staff report. This just runs down the basic qualities, the factors that are evaluated, and when the application goes in, and the types of things that they look for in there. And I would say the one there at the bottom, social equity, is one that's been increasingly popping up in a number of Caltrans grants, including this one. It's not as heavily as in, for example, the active transportation program, where it's basically a prerequisite, but it's still something that's increasingly emphasized. So that's a component that certainly want to include in the scope. As far as the time frame, typically the time frame of these is the submittal date is usually around November, but they pushed it back this year, so it's March 9th, rapidly approaching. Then later in the spring, they'll be doing the evaluation of the applications, announcing the grants, and then the awards will be a few months down the road. And then the starting end of the year and through 2026 is when the grants expire. So that's when all the funds have to be spent and the work completed. Just talk a little bit about the project. So this is a map of the focus area right around the downtown, and it's kind of a few key issues that's driving this. One is that there are two major regional highways, two state highways that converge in the downtown area. So it's there's kind of they serve both as a main street and local circulation, but also a regional function. So a lot of through traffic, and that's happened in quite a few towns, and there's this, sometimes a bit of a conflict between the need to try to move traffic through as well as sort of local circulation and balance safety for all modes. So one of the things that that this is focusing on is looking at a balance of how to address the needs of all modes of transportation, looking at a few different alternatives, analyzing the trade-offs, also including in that looking at this as a part of the land use in the area, supporting economic development in the downtown area, and including urban design features. So the project description, I don't want to read through all of this, it's a little too detailed, but the outcome will be a conceptual plan. As Carrie said, this is a planning grant, and so it's something that you're only allowed to complete up to about 30% design, so conceptual designs, but that's at a level that is adequate to position the city for future grant funding. That's typically the level that they like to see. So you have a concept plan, you have a look of what that's going to be like, and then the detailed design gets worked out in the next phase. Partnerships on this is going to be really critical because of the interaction between the city and the county, and so those stakeholders are going to have to be brought into the process. And part of what we're looking at including is even though all of the detailed analysis will be done within the city limits and in the downtown area, some attention will be paid to circulation issues outside of the city limits, as there may be some potential to explore with the county whether the regional traffic patterns could be modified to potentially take some of that traffic load out of the downtown. That's just one of the potential alternatives to be looking at. Active community engagement, that is certainly a big part of this grant and something that Caltrans again been emphasizing in recent years. And I think a lot of projects used to be more looking at community engagement as just kind of a checking the box, and they're really putting a lot of emphasis on getting out there, being proactive, seeking out input from various aspects, parts of the community, and particularly disadvantaged groups. So that's certainly a big part of the project going forward. So the outcome would be a comprehensive vision, and like I said, I'll show you an example from another project so you can get to see a little bit about what that might look like. We do want to include, I'm just going to skip down here a few bullets. Certainly Caltrans and the county and SCTA, potentially Santa Rosa if some of the areas of regional circulation outside the city get into that area further east where it might impact Santa Rosa. And among the options we're going to be suggesting as among the three would be one that would be potentially looking at taking the one-way couplet back, portions of that back to two-way, focusing more on bicyclists or pedestrians, just kind of looking at the various trade-offs that there are with serving different modes. This also needs to be looked at in the larger context of previous work that has been done, the circulation element, and then some previous studies that have been done in the area as well. I don't need to read down all of the list. I'm just going to also mention at the last one on there is that the Metropolitan Transportation Commission Plan Bay area, pretty much the entire downtown area and all the study areas designated as a priority development area. So that's certainly a strong selling point and a place that would support some potential future grant funding. And this is a map of that, so you can see that it pretty much includes the entire area we're talking about. So the project I'm going to highlight, this is one that we worked on a few years ago in Paso Robles. This is the Niblick Road Corridor, which is a major arterial roadway. And the city had gotten one of these Caltrans planning grants since that time. So we did a detailed operational analysis. This was really focused on as a complete streets project, and the final product was to develop a plan that included a class 1 path along the north side of Niblick, which is that east-west road running through the middle there, and it connected the west side of 101 further to the east past the high school. So it was a pretty major project. So we went through that. About 1.5 miles was the entire corridor. A lot of site-specific improvements, dealing primarily with bicycle pedestrian safety, but also other things like lighting and signal operations. Just some of the graphics. This shows that light blue areas where the path was. This is what that 30% design concept plan looks like as the product. We also did some illustrations to really give a feel for what that would look like. And so this is what the existing roadway looks like, which is kind of an intimidating place to walk or bike. That's a pretty narrow sidewalk on the edge. And here they've got a widened path separated by a barrier, which is what was ultimately proposed. So this project, after completing the plan, which I think was 2020, we then helped the city to put together an active transportation planning grant, which they just recently found out got funded for about $14 million. So this is something that it's a multi-year process from beginning to end. And this won't be completed for another few years, the construction. So probably from the beginning of the planning grant to the end of construction was maybe 10 years. So just to kind of give you a frame of reference for what that might look like. So that's kind of all I had to say. Just wanted to provide that general overview. We're putting together the application, which includes the scope of work, and then developing all of the documentation to back that up and strengthen the application. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments or thoughts.
Okay. Thank you, Barry. Open up to commissioners for any questions, comments at this point for the presenter. And Carrie, I don't know if you can see in this mode if anybody's raising their hand.
I would be happy to see and call on folks if you're having problems with that. I don't see anyone with their hands raised yet. So this is questions for either myself or W-Trans.
And I have a question, some questions if nobody else does, so I'll wait to make sure no one else does.
I don't have any questions at this point, but I do have, when we get to the discussion, I do have some kind of comments or things like that.
Okay. Then I'll go ahead my question if somebody else comes up with some. So on the report, it said that one of the options is going to be to present the two-way street as an option. How was that conclusion, or how was that option come about to say, okay, we're going to look at that as one of the options?
That
I got to say that's one that predates me. I know it's something that had been studied
I can talk a little bit about that, Barry. And I see Vice Chair Fritz his hand raised. So, Paul, do you want to jump in, or do you want me to go first and then jump in?
I was just gonna say it is something that's actually in the general plan, is something to investigate. So when we did the general plan update, years ago, one of the action items was to investigate a two-way street system. And I'll just sort of, full disclosure here, I've been kind of pushing the city to apply for this grant for a number of years. So the fact that it's happening this year, I'm excited about, because I think it's a good opportunity for us. But it seemed like, this grant, this planning activity, it would be a good opportunity to further explore the two-way street idea. So I think that's why it's incorporated into this grant at this time, because it is part of our general plan to take a look at that.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Fritz. I think you took the words out of my mouth. I will note that W-Trans did do some initial kind of feasibility, just a quick memo of are there red flag kind of a memo a few years ago on the two-way street thought, but that was as far as it went at that time. Obviously, the funding to do a larger, more comprehensive study, coordinate with Caltrans and some of the others like the county was a much bigger initiative, would be a much bigger initiative to do that. And I think the way the general plan talks about in that action, that memo, and I'm happy to get it to folks, did not say that, obviously it didn't say that it was infeasible. It discussed some of the issues and some of the advantages of that. This would go into much greater detail, and I think as the town has developed it, we'll take into account, the hotel and some of the other things that have gone on since then.
Okay.
I also want to throw out that the Caltrans has some other of their own planning documents that make that recommendation to investigate going back to a two-way street system. So it sort of supports some of Caltrans' own thinking about the street network in downtown Sebastopol.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask the question before the headlines come out tomorrow that we made a decision to go, two ways from the street. So it's just something
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. So yes, this has actually been in our general plan for, well, since 2016. It was obviously not one of the low-hanging fruit, like the rezoning and some of the housing element things that we have done. It is one of the longer range. I will note that just in terms of the bigger picture things for in town, and I've had some discussion with Steve Weinberger from W-Trans, the principal there. He couldn't be here tonight, both about this project and sort of the other kind of traffic issues in Sebastopol. As you all know, as commissioners, a lot of times when we get development projects, people say, hey, well, that's not a bad project, but what about the traffic? So, it is kind of part and parcel with development. The other component, which would not be a part of this, but is something the city is also looking at as part of sort of other development projects that are under review or that the city has received, is we do have 3 locations in town outside of down. So there's the kind of the two-way or other pedestrian-based biking transit solutions for downtown to make downtown more walkable. I think this grant would actually go a little bit further and try to look at the urban design and making sure that downtown areas are really walkable, safe, and more for pedestrian orientation as a sort of main street should be. The other traffic components of our general plan are to look at that the likely kind of intersection improvements along the 116 corridor are, one is at Covert and 116 coming into town from the north side as a potential either roundabout or signal. There's potentially land there for a roundabout, so that is something that with the development on the north side of the town is something that we kind of need to look at. Are we getting close to those triggers or not? Another is Healdsburg and Murphy, and of course the Planning Commission just had a pre-application preliminary review for a 20-some unit project right at that intersection. Also in our general plan notes, either roundabout or signal. Obviously, the land there is very limited, so it'd be more likely a signal. And then the third location is at for Creston 116. And in talking with Steve and others at W-Trans, that's probably one of the slower ones, or one of the last ones of those to need improvements, because there are signals at Coraline and some other areas down there that assist that. So that's kind of the just a, sorry for the interruption, but that's just sort of the large overview of our circulation element goals and our general plan for those of you who are listening. Those 3 locations, and then the downtown core, or and then obviously the Bodega Avenue improvements are underway to install bicycle lanes and sidewalk gaps and deal with some of the roadway conditions out there.
Okay. And then just for historical perspective, the Furcrest 116 roundabout was looked at, I don't know how many years ago. And there's quite a bit of discussion, information for and against that part of it. So I don't know if that would be useful to kind of look at some of that from before, because nothing's really changed in that area, and really what it had to do with how much of an space do you need around there. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. I looked at the site with all the different criteria and presentation, and it very numerous times mentioned throughout the criteria and so forth about the consideration for disadvantaged communities or disadvantaged census items or whatever. So I'm just wondering if, obviously having more bike lanes opens it up to individuals that, maybe that's their mode of transportation versus vehicles or so forth. So I'm just wondering if, are there any opportunities, realistic opportunities to present that? Has that been looked at? Are there any considerations? I mean, is that even a possibility that some of the areas could be considered kind of the disadvantage strategy to help with that? I'm just kind of curious about that.
Are you asking whether there are disadvantaged communities that would be served by the project?
Yes. And that would be presented as part of the application.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I mean, I've worked on a few projects in Sebastopol, and I've noticed how it varies depending on which year's data you use. So part of it is a matter of what the data shows in a given year. But there are certainly pockets that have shown up as disadvantaged. And then if it's not something that shows up in the census, then we can go to alternative things like looking at where there's clusters of below market rate housing and things like that, where there may be things that are below the census tract level that still show up as pockets of disadvantage. And the way that these grants work is that it's not necessarily that if it's located in that area, as long as you can demonstrate benefit for that community and their involvement in the process.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to kind of encourage that and throw that out, that if there's any opportunity for that, that would be great.
And usually census tract does not work for us because it includes a whole lot of, because it is beyond the city limits, and so it includes a whole lot of county land where there are larger homes and things like that. So, but yeah, there certainly are pockets.
Okay. And then also, my understanding is that the county has, I know we're working with the county, that they've had as part of one of their goals, bypass strategies for Sebastopol. I don't even know if that's realistic or not. I'm just wondering if is that still on one of their goals somewhere, or is that just long gone?
That's not something that I'm aware of. I know that's something we want to include, that they would be certainly involved in the discussions.
Okay. Yeah, and I think Commissioner Kelly might know a little bit more about that, because I know she's brought it up in the past. And then the other question is on the, let's see, under the circulation, the city information about the general plan on page 3-3. It says, it has been suggested that by creating a greater sense of uncertainty and making it unclear who has priority, they're talking about drivers and bicyclists, that it will reduce their speed, and this is conducted to a safer situation. So am I understanding this correctly, that you want to, it almost sounds like you want to make it a little bit riskier, and that way people slow down and be more careful. So I just thought that, I don't know if they can explain that or the concept of that. And it's in the presentation 3-3. It's in the kind of a green box.
Sure. So, and I can, I'll get started, and Barry, I'm sure Barry can talk a little bit about this as well. There are a lot of different theories and things like that that have been tried from time to time about how to do traffic calming. Is the idea of sort of kind of slowing people down. You know, I know our art committee, for instance, is looking at doing artworks at the beginning. Well, they've just got one approved for the start of the Joe Rodota Trail on Petaluma Avenue. Right as you enter downtown, they're going to have one. We're going to have one on the east side of town. You know, having some way of denoting that this is not just a state highway, this is a town. Slow down. You're going to be interacting with pedestrians, with bicycles, with other things. You know, sometimes people will do. You know, you used to do speed bumps. That's progressed to a lot of the intersections in town have started to have bulb outs where the curb comes out. That's kind of one of those, that's a little bit of what this is talking about. It's jutting that pedestrian space out in a way that protects the pedestrian. So we're not talking about making something unsafe, but in a way where it's not just a straight 4-lane. You know, Stu was saying that when at one point the lanes of Highway 116 were like 18 feet wide each. Well, that's a freeway width. You want lanes that are like 11 or 12 feet on an arterial. You don't want lanes that are that big, because the cars will just simply think that it's a freeway because it's still the same amount of room and whatever, and they won't slow down. You put in vertical elements, you put like trees, you put in elements like pedestrian bulb outs, the flashing beacon crosswalks, those types of things that start to make that a shared space and not just vehicle priority space is what this is talking about. And so that's part of, I imagine, Barry, you can speak to this, but some of the elements that would be looked at in terms of when he talks about urban design of the downtown and how that works.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is the kinds of things that Kari mentioned, the treatments vary depending on the type of roadway that you're talking about. So when you talk about uncertainty, I think that discussion I've heard more in thinking about lower volume streets. And it's like, oh, should we put a center line down the road? And if you put a center line down the road, then people feel like, oh, they can just kind of fly down if they stay within there. You remove the center line and people are a little more cautious. But I think on collector or arterial roadways where you've got higher speed, higher volume traffic, narrowing lanes is a pretty common one to a point. But it's, yeah, safety is certainly remains a primary concern. Just that the question is, where do you, there are certain standards that we still want to adhere to at a minimum.
Great, thank you. And then just my last thing is, I just want to make it real clear that this is basically to apply to then do research and investigate. No decisions are being made as to, this is how we're going to do it, whatever. We will be having multiple public comments to get ideas from individuals. Nothing has been said or decided upon. This is just simply to be able to get the funding to go through this process and get public input, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for that. So just wanted to add that to it. Great.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez.
Thank
And
you.
I do see Commissioner Burns has her hand raised.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me, Chair Fernandez brought up one of my main concerns, and personally being on Main Street for many years, I'm not an advocate of going to a two-way street, and that's not what this discussion is about tonight. It's something apparently we're going to look at, but a more beneficial solution, I would think, would be looking at this bypass. And so that was one of my concerns, that that you had mentioned. I just wanted to echo that statement. And one of my concerns is that, with approving all the new housing developments and everything we've been doing, things are kind of spinning very fast. And to me, it just doesn't feel like we have the infrastructure in place to really support all of this. So while I'm an advocate of, housing and low income housing and bringing on all of these changes, I think we really need to look at the infrastructure, and traffic is a major issue. And a lot of merchants are hearing that their customers are just not coming to Sebastopol anymore because the traffic is just incredible, and even down Highway 12. So we have traffic, we have just a lot of issues. So I would like to echo the city bypass, which I think would be a great, and kind of stepping back for a moment and looking at the bigger picture so we can have the infrastructure to support all of this.
Can you put that in form of a question to the presenter?
Yes, thank you. When
Will you be looking at that? Yes.
when you're doing this, will you be looking at that? Can we make sure we, add that, and additionally looking at all the aspects of, converting from a one-way street to a two-way street?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I would say that looking at alternatives, it's not just a matter of changing the directionality, and we're going to look at safety issues, we're going to look at existing conditions, but we are also going to be looking at what is planned growth 5, 10, 20 years out. And for the example, the one that's on the screen now from the other project, I think that their volumes were anticipated to increase pretty dramatically in the next 10 to 20 years. So then we see, well, what does that do to traffic operations 5, 10 years out? Does that make sense? If you remove a lane, if you change this intersection, how does that model? So that's all part of the alternatives analysis.
And maybe going to merchants up and down Main Street when you're looking at this, because I mean, there's been a lot of turnover, but I've been there for over 25 years, and there's a few people who've been there for a minute, because it's a very interesting situation with the two-way street, one-way street on Main Street. There's a lot to take into consideration.
Yeah, but I think representatives of local businesses are going to be really critical stakeholders in that outreach process.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
I have a question, Everett.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Question and then just a little comment. When I was on the council in the 2000s, I was a SCTA rep for the council and the city. And I kept getting the bypass on, the regional plan, and it never had enough traction. There was discussion about what if we go make a bypass between Highway 12 and up by Guerneville, using where the sewer was placed, the sewer line up to the mountains. And then there was concern that once you put a bypass in, then it's growth inducing with all the convenience stores and supportive, vehicular businesses as well. And so there was a little discussion about encroaching into the open space like that. So I have no idea if it's still in the planning documents and the traffic, the county, traffic projects. But again, when you're a small town, it ends up unfortunately being a little bit of a difficulty. There was initially, when I was first told about people wanting a bypass, the businesses did not want it because they were afraid that people wouldn't stop. But when you have terrible traffic, people aren't going to stop either. And so this re-looking at it and doing it again in our general plan and putting those discussions there is very important. And I agree that we should look at that as an option, but it is not an easy thing. So we'll see. I forget who is our SCTA person, but it should be directed to that council member, and I can't remember who it just switched to.
I
in
believe it's Mayor
terms of
Hinton now.
making sure that keeps, in the queue to look at. And then my question is, are we looking at all, if we're looking at, traffic flow, the new bike lane on Petaluma Avenue that changed Petaluma Avenue, down by Palm going north to one lane? I'm wondering, is there any analysis that's going to be done if that's been helpful, if there's any problems with it? I know going on Main, it wasn't a problem, but going north, it cut a whole lane out. And I mean, just me personally, it certainly has been more of a hassle, but I'm just wondering, but not enough for me to want to change it. But I'm just wondering, and this is to Carrie, if are we reevaluating that, and are we looking at that, or has there been any complaints?
Initially, I do know that the council got an earful when the lane was first reduced, but from both sides of the aisle, people who were thankful for it, and then folks who were, and I don't know if they were trying to get through town quickly or just get into town, who wanted the lanes to stay. I do believe that W-Trans and Steve did take a look at the impacts after that was done. Barry, you probably don't have the details for that tonight, but it did not significantly, I believe, impact the overall traffic flow because it does go back to two lanes, once you get to downtown. And it's really, if you look at it, it's really was extending, it's one lane coming into town, and it was really just extending that one lane a little bit further before opening it up into two lanes. It wasn't two lanes, then one lane, then two lanes again. So I think it took a while for people to get used to, but the overall impact, I don't believe was that significant.
Okay, I just don't see a lot of usage of it, and there are some drivers, that unfortunately do use that as a path. Not many, but some. So sorry that I know it's a little off topic, but it's still, we're looking at what we need to help move traffic flow through downtown. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
I can say something.
We'll be getting to public comment as soon as the commissioners are done, which should be soon.
Do you see any other commissioners wanting to comment?
I do not, Chair
No question.
Fernandez.
Okay. All right. Well, in this case, then I will go ahead and open it for public comment. And this will be for 3 minutes. And we just wanted to ask, we can't engage in any conversation or dialogue, but if you have questions, we can address them after the public comment is completed.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. And we'll go ahead and get started with labeled as Sevenfold Creative.
Yes.
Can you see the 3-minute timer?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
My name is Eric Spillman. I've sort of been involved with a core project over the years, and basically this outline that you guys have going looks really good. It seems like it's considering a lot of things that Sebastopol will help Sebastopol sort of re-envision its downtown and its circulation. But I think one of the healthiest things we can do is just be really open in this, rather than actually coming up with solutions, that we think have potential, because traffic engineers, the people, the professionals at this, if they can look at it without any bookends or any roadblocks, they're going to be able to come up with probably the most fluid and most, correct model. And there's lots of, one-way traffic. It does take a lot of time to get around a circle to a place because you've got to go around streets. Also, two-way traffic provides people going by the same businesses twice a day versus once. On one-ways, they go south, they pass it in the morning, they come home north, and they don't see it again. They're on another avenue. But what would be interesting is to find out all this stuff, through this study, the benefits and possible drawbacks of all of it. But I love just being open, and that's my comment for now.
Thank you. And I apologize, our 3-minute timer isn't working yet, but thank you for keeping your comments to those 3 minutes. I appreciate it. So coming up, it looks like we have Lisa Pierce and then Emily Sharton and then Jane Ehrlich. Lisa, can you see the 3-minute timer?
No, but mine's pretty short.
All right, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I know we all want the best for our downtown, and there's many different ways to go about doing that, like widening the sidewalks. I wanted to chime in with one very simple and low cost idea for traffic calming. I remember back in the 90s and early 2000s, Sebastopol had kind of a reputation for being a speed trap. And I haven't seen nearly as much enforcement of our speed limits in recent years. And if we could have Main Street be a reduced speed limit, like maybe 15 miles per hour and really enforced, it could even be a way for the city to make some money. So anyway, I wanted to just put that out there. And I also want to mention that there's a public comment about the history of the one-way streets in our downtown. And the history was gathered from old newspaper, from Sebastopol Times newspapers, kind of laying out the history of how we arrived at what we have now. And to see the public comments, some people may not know, but if you go to the page about this meeting, there's documents attached and it's in there. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for your comment. And yes, we did get that public comment to the planning commissioners, and it's on the webpage. Very interesting history. Emily, can you see the 3-minute timer?
No, but my comments also won't be 3 minutes.
All right, please go ahead.
Thanks. I'm Emily Sharton. I'm with the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. And we're really pleased to hear about this grant opportunity and the opportunity to improve bike competitive infrastructure in the downtown. And the Bike Coalition definitely looks forward to being involved going forward. And I just also wanted to put in a plug for a group that the Bike Coalition is working with, a group of citizens called Bike Sebastopol that is working on kind of building community and culture around cycling, and they're also staying involved in local policy and infrastructure conversations. So I'm hoping that they can be involved, that the city will involve them in any of these discussions going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily. Jan, can you see the timer?
I can. This is great.
All right, please go ahead, Jan.
Thank you. Hi. This is terrific. Very excited about this, and working with some of the people all around us on Bloom. So if you think of bloomtown.org, go to that. We're going to try to keep the community engaged. And my question is, how do we support this grant? How does this active community engagement piece get realized? And that's the Bloom folks, the people that are phoning in there and participating in meetings, are very talented and a cross section of our community. So I'd like to know specifically, can we support the grant in any which way? Not just letters, but perhaps further documentation of issues in town. So whatever W-Trans comes up with, that'd be great. It looks terrific. Keep going, but the deadline is looming. So I don't think we're going to solve anything tonight, but I'd just like to know how we can support the grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Steve Pierce. Steve, can you see the timer?
I can, thank you.
All right, please go ahead.
I got just a couple of quick questions and a quick comment. The questions are, given that this is a climate-related grant, do we have any idea about the greenhouse gas emissions reductions that would be part of this, or air pollution for that matter? Or would that be part of a later actual study that would be funded by the grant? And then another question is, we have the downtown core circled here on the screen. Would we also be including any kind of effects on all the adjoining roads that might be used as shortcuts in the scenario of two-way? So in other words, this is what we're looking at right here in the downtown, but how wide a circle are we really going to cast on the actual implications or feasibility of our approaches? And then the last is just a quick comment. I walk pretty much every day in town, and I love the new crosswalks with the lights, but I got to tell you, I've had some near incidents being hit and have seen other people hit at the crosswalk there in front of the art car supply place that crosses over to the CVS parking area. You get cars going along there, and can be a dicey situation with people not seeing you, and want to make sure that whatever we do includes some safety improvements there. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other public comments? As noted, we did get a couple of public comments via email, which have been shared with the commission. I am not seeing any other public comments. So I will turn it back over to the chair. And Barry, do you mind stopping the screen share so the commissioners can see each other? You can always pull it back up if needed. Thank you.
Okay. I want to address some of the questions that were made there. So one was how to support the grant. And, I'm assuming that it's once the grant is being positive mindset, once the grant is awarded, that then the support of it is to, for individual citizens to come to these commenting and give their input. Is there anything that can be done with the application to help support it, and anything that you know of?
So I'll let Barry chime in. However, I think if we had positive support from local business owners in the downtown area or organizations for the grant part of it, I know we're looking at asking the Planning Commission for a letter of support. I can't imagine that would hurt, but I do appreciate the community engagement enthusiasm, and yes, I will take you up on that offer to help with community engagement. And if there are sort of a survey of problem spots or things like that, I think that kind of local knowledge from local business owners and people who are like us, who are in downtown every day, would be helpful. Barry, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would just agree with what you said for the most part. I mean, I think to the degree we can get a diverse set of support letters, representing a range of interests in the community, I think that would be really helpful. As we said before, disadvantaged communities are something that Caltrans is looking closely at. So I think if there are any organizations, maybe manager of affordable housing complex near the area, or some group that serves low-income individuals within that area, that could be really beneficial. But certainly the business community, any other constituent groups, I think showing a broad range of support would be really helpful.
Yeah, and again, this is just to qualify for the grant, not, we're not making any decisions and so forth. So, qualifying the grants, we get the funds to then be able to look at these things, and then it'll open up discussion on that. I know that there's quite a bit of involvement with, one of the other questions was regarding climate, greenhouse gas. I know that's part of the criteria. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
That's not something that is emphasized in this grant as much. There are other grants within the program that are more climate focused. So this one is, I think it's something that would support the grant if we can show that, for example, there'd be a mode shift and we would reduce vehicle transportation and increase active transportation, or increase transit ridership, that kind of thing. It's not something we need to quantify for the purposes of this.
And Barry, I think just one of the questions, because every time I live on the north side of town, and every time I have to go to somewhere around Palm Drive Hospital, and I have to go all the way down to where it's two-way basically, just to get right back up to, I kind of think about the extra mileage, the extra traffic, the extra turns, and the greenhouse gas and the VMT that comes from that. Will there be an opportunity in the grant to look at some of that? There's sort of the pass-through trips in Sebastopol, which certainly if we can get rid of some of that it would reduce greenhouse gas and VMT as people are waiting in traffic. But there's also the other side of it is all of the very short local trips, which are probably double what they actually need to be because of the one-way system. Would the grant be looking at those types of things as it's analyzing the traffic patterns?
It's a good question. It's not, typically when we look at traffic, we're looking more at operations. And so, vehicle delay, we look at safety, things like that. That's a different analysis, what you're talking about. That's a good question. I have to see, if there's a good tool that's available for that kind of thing. I can think of a few ways to go about it, but that's worth exploring. Okay. And I think certainly, before implementing something like this, it would need to go through CEQA, and that is one of those analysis of what would be the VMT be, what would the greenhouse gas be. I think one of the questions actually I saw in the chat is what is the relationship to the bike and ped master plan that is being updated in the next year. So it's actually, and Barry, I don't know if W Trans has thought about this or not, although I know Steve is certainly aware of the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. It seems like actually that is really good timing in terms of taking that comprehensive look about, our current bicycle and pedestrian master plan is from about 2010, and we've implemented a lot of it, or we already have plans like on Bodega where the sidewalk gaps are and the bicycle lanes are going on for implementing those types of things. Well, what's next then? And some of that in my mind is the street connectivity and how this might play into that. Do you have any thoughts on that to add? It's interesting. I'm looking back at the last plan that was adopted. Since that time, once everything gets completed on Bodega, I don't think it's all funded at this point, but I think that completes just about all the bike lanes that were in that plan. So that's bike lanes. What's interesting is that in the last 10 years or so, there's really been a big shift in the whole planning of bicycle facilities to try and create what they call low level of traffic stress streets. So creating things like buffers between bike lanes and travel lanes, and so looking for opportunities like that to have more protection for bicyclists. So it may not be necessarily putting a new bike lane at this location. It might also be a matter of enhancing existing facilities. And so how that fits in with whatever is done on the streets, maybe there's a couple of extra feet that can be found through restriping a lane or things like that. There may be some opportunities to enhance it that way.
And another question regarding looking at traffic flow and so forth, but also keeping in mind what it will cause for shortcuts or surface street. I'm assuming that that's definitely will be part of that process, not only just say this is going to increase flow, but what effect will it have on other side streets.
Yeah, and we'd be identifying, or whoever is doing the analysis would go out and identify a whole set of study intersections, because like you said, one can affect the next and the next and the next. So there might be 10, 15, 20 intersections that all get analyzed, and when you start doing different scenarios, it moves things around, and then you start seeing what those kinds of consequences look like.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for answering those questions. And so now bring it back to commission for additional questions, comments, and then Carrie, what would be helpful from the commission that you need from us before we get into too much discussion here?
So actually, I'm going to ask Barry on that, because he's the guy putting together the grant at this point. I have enjoyed the discussion so far, just in terms of, I obviously was not here when the general plan was done, other than as a resident. So hearing some of the history and things has been very helpful to me, but also sort of some of your initial thoughts are very interesting. But Barry, are there any items, other than items we may have missed, or things like, well, there's the two-way street, but then there's the bypass and other things that are missing that you want Barry and myself to know about? Okay, and Chair Fernandez, Vice Chair Fritz has his hand up.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks. I wanted to kind of follow up on what Gary was talking about a little bit earlier with the having to go all the way down south and then circle back around up Petaluma Avenue, and how that kind of adds to the traffic. And the one thing that kind of stands out in my mind in particular, and things that changed, something that's changed relatively recently, is the kind of popularity of the Barlow. And if you're coming from the north part of town, to get to the Barlow, you have to make, a lot of loops to get there, because you have to go all the way down to, Bodega, down Sebastopol Road, back up Petaluma, or back up Morris. And, some of these one-way streets create additional traffic just because you have to kind of loop back around on yourself to get to where you actually want to go. So I just want to throw that out there. Although I do have some other kind of comments about the grant itself I'd like to throw out there. The one thing that, and I realize we're not seeing the full documentation, but one thing I think is important, I think the traffic is obviously important. People get excited about traffic, and we need to know what the traffic implications are. But really, in my mind, the part of the issue, a big issue of the downtown is just it's not a great place. When you're downtown, the sidewalks are too narrow. The traffic actually that is there often moves way too fast, particularly when you get south of Bodega. And I think, really traffic calming is going to be super important, because it just doesn't feel like a place that people want to hang out, because it feels more like a highway. And I think we really need to, think about, what do we want to be? Do we want to be a place that moves traffic through efficiently, or do we want to be a place where people actually want to spend some time? So I think I just want to make sure the grant sort of focuses on the, or at least not focuses, but it has a good portion of emphasis on kind of the urban design and kind of placemaking component, not get too caught up in just analyzing the traffic circulation. I think that's an important part of it, but I also think an equally important part of it is to consider the placemaking opportunities. One of the issues I talk about a lot is, a great case study in Sebastopol of a real nice people-oriented, kind of mixed-use place in the Barlow, and a place that's kind of less successful in kind of the Main Street area. You can walk down Main Street on a Friday or Saturday night and hardly see a soul, and then you get to the Barlow and there's hundreds of people there. So how can we bring some of that vitality to downtown? I think is an important aspect of this grant. And I also just wanted to throw out, Caltrans has a document called Main Street, California. They published about 10 years ago that talks a lot about, when your main street is a Caltrans highway, it's kind of a different animal. And I think they have a lot of good kind of quotes and sort of things in there that I'm sure you're familiar with it, but one of the things they say in there is livable main streets convey a sense of place and enable communities to thrive. And I think in my mind, that's a really important aspect of this. If we want to create a main street that's really, a center and a focal point and something that we can be proud of as a community. And it helps our downtown businesses to thrive. And efficient throughput of cars may not be the thing that makes our downtown thrive. So I guess, I just want to kind of make sure we include those kinds of ideas in the grant, really focus on the pedestrian and alternate methods of transportation. I think if it's a nice place and people want to spend time there, they're going to come to downtown and park their car and feel like they want to walk around. People say, oh, it's so, I can't find a place to park. And I think part of that issue is not that there's no place to park, it's that they don't want to walk down Main Street far because it's really not that pleasant of a walk. People don't mind walking a distance if it's a nice walk. So, you can park down by the post office and you think that's a far walk to get to Copperfields because it's really not all that pleasant. But if we make that a pleasant 2 blocks to walk, 2 blocks is really not that far if you have to end up parking in front of the post office or down in that section of Main Street. So I think we need to make sure, again, that we really have some attention on kind of the urban design and placemaking, because I think people are willing to get out of their cars and walk more and bike more if they feel comfortable and safe. So I just want to make sure that those are incorporated into this application. And I'm excited about the opportunity, if we get this grant, to really start talking about some of those things and what makes a good place where people actually want to be. Let's see. Oh, and then I wanted to reach out to Emily if she's still here. As we mentioned earlier, letters of support are important. I think the Bike Coalition would be a great support of this application if they could put together a letter of support to be included. I think that would be really important. And anyone else here that represents some organization in town. I think, again, like Barry was saying, having a variety of different types of people or groups supporting this application goes a long way with Caltrans. Hopefully we can, if it hasn't been done already, someone can reach out to the Downtown Association and the Chamber of Commerce and other organizations that are involved in the downtown to ask for their letter of support for this project. So I think that would be really helpful.
Actually, regarding the support letters, one thing I would add is if there's anyone that would be like a good speaker on behalf of public health and the benefits of walking and making more pedestrian friendly downtown, that would be something that would be certainly favorable for this.
That's a good idea. And I don't know if you talk about, I can't remember, in the report, I know it's kind of a current buzzword, even with Caltrans, it's kind of a complete streets idea, making sure we talk about, we want to make a complete street, not just a vehicle oriented street. And the one thing that I think is also important about downtown, I think this was probably partially captured in, looking at kind of regional partnerships with other, the county and the transportation coalition. But one of the big things I think is problematic downtown is the through traffic, primarily the gravel trucks. There's a lot of big, loud trucks that go through downtown that make it a rather unpleasant experience. So looking to partner with these other organizations to try to figure out how do we get some of those trucks to not come through downtown and kind of a little bit more control over that, I think would be super helpful, because that really impacts kind of the quality of life when you're downtown and these huge loud trucks kind of go rumbling by. Yeah, I think that's all my kind of comments for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Other commissioners have comments or questions at this point? Okay, do we need to, we do need to make a motion for the chair, myself, to letter of support?
Yes, yes, so we do have on the agenda, as a regular agenda item, and in the staff report, the request for the planning commission to authorize the the planning commission chair to provide a letter of support. We can do that one of two ways. One is if there's a motion to just enable the chair to sign that letter, I can work with him directly to write that, or it could come back at your next meeting, which I think would be just in time for the grant. So I would suggest if folks feel comfortable, just having authorizing the chair to sign that letter.
I'd like to make a motion that we have the chair sign a letter of support for this Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Grant.
I will second the motion.
And any other discussion or comments on that motion? Okay, and I think you have enough feedback, right, Carrie? And then we could just go ahead. Okay,
Yes.
so let's call for the vote on this motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Burns,
Aye.
Commissioner Ottinger,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fritz,
Aye.
and Chair Fernandez.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously, and thank you all, public and commissioners, for your thoughts this evening on this.
Yeah,
It's
thank you,
very
Barry.
helpful for
Appreciate-
us.
Yeah, appreciate you being here and all your information and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate all your comments.
Thanks, Barry.
Okay, let's move on to item 6A, zoning ordinance amendment. And Carrie, you or John's gonna.
I got this one.
John will be giving that report.
Okay, great. Thank you, John.
No problem. So tonight's item is a zoning amendment request from the 421 group on behalf of Region West. The request is to amend the current cannabis ordinance to allow cannabis retail delivery only within the industrial M district. For context, the Planning Commission held a study session for this topic at their November 8th, 2022 meeting, where they discussed the following key points. And those are: should retail delivery only be allowed in the industrial M zone? Should co-location with a manufacturing use be required? If so, what criteria should it meet? What level of city approval should be required? Should there be a limited amount of licenses or unlimited? Should all the criteria for location, operation, etc. for delivery only licenses be applicable to the delivery only in the M zone? The commission's feedback to staff on these questions is outlined in the staff report, so I won't go through all of them, but it is in there. Staff has also provided a red line and clean copy of the changes to the cannabis ordinance section 17.360 of the Sebastopol Municipal Code. Two of those changes include a repeal and replace of 17.360 and also a note within chapter 17.40, which is the public notice requirements, table 2, which would require those permits to be mailed to all adjoining property owners, much like we do our temporary use permits. With that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution that recommends the City Council adopt the zoning ordinance amendments. I am happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have. And Andrew is with us tonight to provide a presentation from the applicant group.
Okay, so let's start with any questions from commissioners to staff. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So,
Oh, Paul.
oh, Paul, there you are. Thank you.
So I just want to confirm, so the only change to that section of the code, the section 360, is the slight change in the table to allow that as a permitted use. And then we added the section, the 360.095, is that correct?
It's 7.5.
Oh, 7.5.
Yeah, I
Where-
think
where-
the report might mention 9.5, but it's 7.5, which is
What page
the
is that?
So that's page, I'm looking at the 114 of the PDF. That's the redlined version,
Okay.
because that's just not 0.95. And I wanted to just point out, like, so in that section, if it's 7.5 or 9.5, item B, it's worded a bit strangely. I'm just wondering is that supposed to be how it's worded? It says the co-located cannabis retail delivery office only are subject to are subject to the following criteria? This is are subject to following criteria are subject to an administrative permit review. So are we saying that they are subject to the following, the criteria below or something, as well as being subject to an administrative permit review? I guess I'm just not sure what that's saying.
Yeah, so the intent of that is, and I think we can certainly work out that wording. You're not, to make it clearer. The intent is that we would require an administrative permit. That's basically how we confirm that they are meeting all the criteria. And the intent is, if they don't meet those criteria, they could still potentially get they wouldn't be considered a co-located with manufacturing use. It would be like a bona fide delivery, and it would need to go to the planning commission for a use permit.
Yeah, but do you see how it's worded? Like the wording is a little confusing.
Yes, yeah.
So if that could just be cleared up.
Yeah, are subject to the following criteria and will be evaluated through the administrative permit review process or something like that, so that it's
yeah. Okay, that's all I had, just to clear that up.
Thank you. Or we could actually just make an administrative permit is required as one of the criteria, and then that would probably just eliminate a lot of most of that, the second part of that sentence.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think I see anything else. Andrew, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for being here, and you're welcome to make your comments, the presentation.
All right, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, well, hello. My name is Andrew Longman. I'm the COO of 421 Group. We're a cannabis consultancy based here in Sebastopol. I'm accompanied on this presentation by Mitcho Thompson, the president of the Resourcery, and Craig Litwin, the CEO of the Resourcery. The Resourcery is also known as Regen West in the amendment materials. And it is a local cannabis manufacturer and distributor located on Morris Street. We want to thank you for hearing our request for the zoning code text amendment to add direct to consumer delivery to existing cannabis manufacturing and distribution uses. As many of you are aware, the legal cannabis industry in California has taken a major hit. The price of outdoor flower and distillate has dropped precipitously year over year. There is a race to the bottom. Margins are shrinking and near disappearing. Businesses are failing at an unprecedented rate. The cannabis industry is in tumultuous times, but we believe that there are brighter days ahead for those who can weather the storm. So the question is, how do we build a boat on which our local operators can weather the storm and keep our local cannabis economy strong? We think that one clear way is to allow for diversified revenue through permitting direct-to-consumer sales for the handful of local cannabis businesses that have been able to operate here locally. Another way is to speed up any permitting process that we can, which our zoning code text amendment requests for local cannabis manufacturers and distributors. The proposed amendment will have no impact on the surrounding area. There will be no impact on surrounding uses, as it is delivery only. The amendment proposes direct-to-consumer delivery only as a supplemental use to already permitted cannabis manufacturing and distribution businesses. This addition will be imperceptible and helps to implement the Sebastopol general plan. A couple things that this proposed amendment is. It is compatible with the objectives of the general plan and any applicable specific plan. It is in conformity with public convenience, general welfare, and good land use practice, and is an opportunity to generate sales use tax for the city of Sebastopol. This proposed amendment will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or general welfare, and it will not adversely affect the orderly development of property. Thank you, commissioners, for your consideration, and thank you, staff, for all the work you've put into this already. We are here and available to field any questions that you may have.
Okay, and here I ask you to, do you see any commissioners? I'm only seeing the presentation and then one other piece.
Oh, Andrew, can you stop sharing and then we'll be able to.
Yeah, let me.
Thanks. I did not see any commissioners with hand raised, though, Chair Fernandez.
Yeah, I always think there are, and then I miss somebody. Just want to make sure. And I just, before I open it to public comment, I just wanted to reiterate that this isn't an amendment that we would approve that all of a sudden opens delivery in Sebastopol, basically, because that's already allowed by the state from outside entities coming in and making deliveries. So basically what this would do, if it's not enacted, is to say that local businesses can, but it doesn't, I just want to make sure it's clear that it doesn't mean that then no deliveries can be made. That's something that's not out of our control. So before we open public comment, I don't know if you want to make.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. And yes, yeah, and we do have 3 delivery only licenses that aren't associated with manufacturing use in town, 2 of which have been issued. One with Soulful and one with Spark. And we do have a 3rd, which has never been for delivery only, which has never been approved and issued. I think that may have happened if delivery was allowed within the manufacturing zone. And I do know that the one time that I was here when the commission reviewed delivery only permit, the question of, well, if it's delivery and no storefront, that seems appropriate for the manufacturing zone, since it's logistics. But at that time, or until now, unless this amendment were passed, delivery only is not allowed in the manufacturing zone. So it's simply, it's also kind of already allowed in Sebastopol, just not in this particular zone.
So if there's another quick, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. So if you have any public comment, 3 minutes, and Carrie will recognize you. So either virtual or literally raising your hand.
Thank you. And I do see Yarrow Kubrin has, thank you, his hand up. Can you see the timer?
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure with the 3 minute start.
All right, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Yarrow Kubrin. I'm a 20-year Sebastopol resident. I was on the Sonoma County Growers Alliance Cities Committee, founding member of the Sonoma County chapter of the California Cannabis Industry Association. I've held committee positions with the National Cannabis Industry Association. I'm currently on the board of the Sonoma County Cannabis Alliance. One could say I have a little bit of experience in the space. And, I don't see, first of all, this noticing requirement. I mean, the only thing that is more the only thing more regulated in California than cannabis is nuclear power, and Sebastopol is already a nuclear free zone. I don't know why you got to notice your neighbors that you're making deliveries if you already have the ability to make deliveries for wholesale, and the only difference is the recipients, because there's already distribution allowed from this place, so they can already do business to business cannabis deliveries. Again, that seems like a lot of administrative burden. California cannabis industry, regulated industry, suffers from overtaxation, a lack of access to retail. It was a big deal to even get another dispensary approved beyond Spark for Soulful. I spoke in favor of Soulful as well. I have no financial interests with Resourcery or Soulful. And it just, this direct to consumer model, it just increases access. It means less traffic in downtown, which is the other thing that we were talking about, because the only two brick and mortar dispensaries are on our two main thoroughfares. I think the argument that there's already a couple delivery licenses would really be a restriction on trade and the opportunity that regulated cannabis businesses can garner from the facilities that they've already established, which are very expensive to set up. We have two very successful dispensaries in town. I don't see this as being something that's going to negatively impact neighbors, or where there needs to be a large administrative burden or hurdle to the existing business merely to be able to bolt on this additional capacity. And again, with a distribution license, they're already able to make B2B deliveries. The only question is whether they can make B2C deliveries. And I just think that really, if we're going to support cannabis, we destigmatize it by treating it like most other businesses, which means we lower the regulatory hurdle. And I just invite the Planning Commission to think about this in a way that's consistent with the way that we regulate other businesses. And to my knowledge, Resorcery hasn't had any issues there. And to me, this just seems like an easy no-brainer, great, no problem. And I think you support other cannabis businesses in doing that, because this is a standard that would be applied to industrial and not just to the Resorcery. I'm a zoning geek with 20 years real estate experience and 20 units of real estate in college. So zoning is to property like the DNA is to an organism. And I can't think of a single compelling argument why an industrially zoned property couldn't easily accommodate delivery vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, Yarrow. The next speaker we have is Zach. Zach, can you see the timer? And can you unmute yourself? Zach, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Oh yeah, that's helpful, right?
Perfect, thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Zach Guarinoni. I am the co-founder of Audi Hash, one of the licensed manufacturers here in Sebastopol. There's not much to follow up with after Yarrow and Andrew. They pretty much nailed everything on the head. The cannabis industry is clearly in dire need of some support, and allowing a direct-to-consumer option for the existing licensed businesses would be a huge help. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Any other public comments? All right, Chair Fernandez, I do not see any other public comments. And John, did we get any public comments via email?
No, I didn't receive any public comments that weren't part of this one. There were some from the previous report that were included in staff report.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, just to reiterate, we did have just quite a bit of a discussion on this prior, so we're just kind of coming back to it. So it's just in case if it looks like, hey, we're not talking a lot about it, or if it's getting through, it's because we've discussed it before. So just want to make sure that's clear. Okay, so bring it back for any discussions or motions, comments, additional questions. I will go ahead and make a motion for approval. Yeah, Paul, go ahead. Well, you make a motion in a second, then we can do comments. Is that everybody okay with that?
What's that?
If we can I made a motion, so if we have a second, then we can have discussion.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize you made a motion. Okay, I'll second it then.
Okay, all right, and go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I just appreciate the thoroughness of this application that you guys put together. It's always nice to see, a lot of background and information. And as Everett said, we talked a lot about this in a meeting in November. It's actually the minutes we approved tonight. So it's nice to have those minutes to review and then kind of refresh ourselves as to where we were when we talked about this before. But yeah, I'm supportive of this. I'm supportive of this amendment.
And I'm not seeing any other comments from Commission. Okay, I'll go ahead and ask for the vote on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Kelly.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Ottinger.
Aye.
Commissioner Burns,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fritz,
Aye.
and Chair Fernandez.
Aye.
Thank you. That passed unanimously, 5-0. So that is a resolution to support or recommending to City Council. So that is the next step, that they adopt these amendments with the modification for language, as Vice Chair Fritz had pointed out to clarify that. I believe, just for those who are interested, I was trying to look at the forward calendar. I believe this would go to the council on, is that March 1st, John? Do you have that with you or no? If you hang on just a second, I can look at when it's scheduled to go.
March 1st is a Wednesday, so
Sorry, March 8th.
March
7th.
7th. March 7th.
7th, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so
believe that's
Yarrow
on
and those
March
who,
7th.
yes, and I just opened our forward calendar and it is proposed for that date. That is tentative until the agenda, the City Council Agenda Review Committee confirms that, but just for those of you who would be interested in attending, most likely will be March 8th, and we will be doing similar public noticing for this item as well.
So, curious with clarification. So once the council does it, assuming they adopt it, then it has to go to a second reading, and then people can apply for this administrative permit after that. Is that how it would work?
So thank you. The way ordinances work, there you're correct. The first, the presentation and first vote, first reading, it's called, would be on March 8th. It then goes to a second reading, which is required for all ordinances. Sorry, March 7th. March 21st would be the second reading. And then assuming that's adopted, it would then go into effect 30 days later. To be official, and that is state law for all ordinances or changed to our municipal code. And so just one comment, should the City Council adopt as presented or as recommended by the Planning Commission, we would actually be able to process Zach's application for this particular co-location administratively, and we'll be able to issue it on that sort of day 30, day 31. So as soon as it goes into effect, if they were to determine that that they want a Planning Commission use permit level for all co-locations and change the Planning Commission recommendations, then we would work to get that back to you again before that 30 days is up, so that they can move forward.
All right, thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Andrew, thank you for being here and the presentation, your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to item 7A, proposed fiscal year 2023 to 2024 parks budget.
Thank you. So this item is brought to you by the sort of the trifecta of folks who are in charge of parks for the city. Myself as planning director, I monitor all of the various park funds, sit on the Measure M Parks Technical Committee, which is the sales tax measure that generates about $110,000 this year, and likely next year as well for parks. And work on park planning and obviously and staff liaison to you all as the park commission. Tony Bertolero from engineering, who engineering is responsible for capital improvement projects. So anything that's a larger project and not a maintenance goes through engineering. Either Tony or Mario Landeros, who's our contract city engineer, who does the actual bids and inspections and put together the bid documents for those projects. And Dante Del Prete, who's our public works superintendent in charge of park maintenance, and certainly helps us out with institutional memory, although I'm learning more every year. So the three of us met a couple weeks ago to talk about the park budgeting. Our budgets are actually due tomorrow, so if I'm a little blurry-eyed, it's because I've been staring at spreadsheets all day and tomorrow. But we did meet a couple weeks ago about the park budget. We just to overview, for those of you who have not been through this before, we do have three general places where park funding comes from. One is that Measure M fund, Again, we're looking at about $110,000 for the next fiscal year. That we have to coming into the account. I would say the economy hasn't slowed down that much, but also with inflation, it has sort of balanced out. And so we're continuing to see that at sort of an incremental growth. We do have a park improvement fund, which is charges for development. Those are the impact fees, if you all recall the impact fee study that was adopted a couple of years ago. This last year, I think we only had about one new single family home, and we had a number of ADUs, but they are not generally not subject to impact fees unless they're above a certain size. So that certainly has reduced the park impact fees over the last several years as the fees for those ADUs has gone away. So we didn't have a lot added to the park improvement fund this year. And that's a charge that's charged to just to residential and hotels on a hotel room basis, so not to other commercial developments like traffic impact fees, say, might be. Our balance on the park improvement fund is fairly low. We will be looking at some funding, some more significant funding in the next couple of years. But under state law, housing projects, development projects can ask for deferral of park fees until occupancy. And actually, this is something that I've granted in the past for residential projects, both to help the developer and the recognition that, whereas the traffic impact you kind of get right away because of the construction, the park impact you actually don't see until it's full of residents. So that's not an unusual thing, but now under state law, that's required of us. I do know the Woodmark project is probably the biggest one that will be paying those fees. Their first phase, which is 48 units, is likely to start construction in March, but it would not be completed until I think they have a 16 to 18 months schedule, depending. And so they would be paying those fees at the end of that. And so we will see a pretty big fund then. The Hotel Sebastopol has a fee deferral agreement to pay that over time, similar to what the Barlow had for some of their impact fees. So again, that's a couple of years down the road before we would start to see revenue for that. Those are the two kind of major projects in the pipeline, the Huntley Square and the Habitat townhomes. Again, I anticipate they'll probably ask for deferral of that until the end, and so that would be in future years. The other component is grant funding. We have started working with the cities, has recently hired a grant consultant. It's not something that I'm going to put into the budget. If we get money for that, that's great, and council will gladly do a budget amendment for it. But I'm not a fan of putting stuff in before you sort of have some clue on any grant funding. So they are looking at a couple of grants for that potential for parks. And we are continuing to work with Riley and Jessica Hall under CUSP to look at, and we just got a little bit of feedback from the Coastal Commission about some potential grant money there to further that the pre-design work for that project. But I did not put any of that grant funding into the budget for this year, or was not planning on it, since we don't know what quantity or what that would be. And so I'm not going to rely on that for our capital projects. The other option is the general plan, the general fund. The city does not generally have, I know that this last year or so, they've operated at a deficit and gone into reserves. So I don't anticipate there to be any additional funding coming from the general fund this year. It's going to be fairly tight in terms of balancing the budget. And I know that's a pretty, we've been asked to sharpen our pencils on a number of fronts so that the city can do that. The other component, of course, is user fees, but those generally go to the Public Works Department or they actually go to the general fund directly, but certainly they're basically charged to cover the maintenance cost of trash removal, cleanup, those types of things. So that's our funding sources. When Dante, Tony, and I met, we did look at being somewhat strategic in terms of not going after or funding brand new projects again this year. Part of that is to make sure that we can rebuild our funds so that we have match for any state grants. For instance, the Prop 68 that we use for Libby Park and that we will be using for a portion of the Ives Park pathway requires a 20% match. And so that is, we can use our local money for that. The Dante did also request that we have that the funding for some additional tree work. He's got a few kind of larger tree removal, tree work components that need to be done this year at Burbank Farm, I believe, is where most of those are. And that can, the Measure M park funding is maintenance, can be used for maintenance. And so we are recommending that that increase. I believe he asked for 15,000 instead of the 4,000 that we've been allocating out of the Measure M. I did just get a cost estimate for the AmeriCorps Trail extension today. I know engineering was working on this and I sort of pushed him to get it before this meeting, so I had some clue on where things were going. It looks like it's actually we have in our CIP $300,000 for construction. And it looks like it will be $300,000 for construction at this point, given what we know. We do have a little bit of additional survey costs. The original survey that was submitted with the grant was inadequate for construction. And so we have some additional work going to that. So that will be in this year's budget, but we are looking at probably about $30,000 or $40,000 additional that we'll be needing in next year's budget to cover the construction costs. So where we had 300,000, it'll be more like $340,000 for that project when all told. And so those are the kind of the pieces that we're proposing funding go towards. If we do have additional funding to potentially do additional pathway replacement in Ives Park, that's still compatible with the revised master plan in Calder Creek. There's definitely additional frontage that we could do for that. The bid documents that are about to be released are from the southwest portion barbecue up to the pool and the restrooms, the public restrooms that are on the north side of the pool building. If we have additional dollars, we'll continue that up towards the playground area. And that won't be impacted by any changes in the creek alignment. So that's in a nutshell what we're proposing for the park funding. And then again, accumulating any additional Measure M dollars this year. There are no limits on accumulating that and keeping that for larger projects. So the recommendation is to keep that should we need for any cost overruns or any grant matches. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions that I can on any of either the current CIP projects or the budgeting.
Can I just clarify something? We've kind of looked at this before. So is this just more updates from before?
Well, we do our budget on a yearly basis every single year. So we only look, our capital, I shouldn't say that, our capital, and I can actually share the screen. Our capital improvement plan does look out a couple of years. And so here you can see the, like for the trail connection from the Barlow Townhomes to the Tamagotchi Park, so across Park Village. We have a small amount, and this is actually, we're proposing to push this funding to next, out a year or two. But we have a small amount for the design and just getting that alignment, and then the bulk of it happens the next year. And so this is kind of how the capital projects, as you kind of can see a multi-year project just because they're large enough that they're going to span more than 1 year. So we do look out until 26, 27 where needed. But the city council only adopts the fiscal year so this is the adopted fiscal year budget for 22-23 that you're looking at here. So what we're doing right now is we are required to submit our budget for fiscal year 23-24. So from July 1st of this year to June 30th of the next year. And so we use this as an opportunity to both update like projects that are delayed. So like the trail connection from Tamagotchi Park, we're requesting that be pushed to a later year. We actually, thanks to Joe Gaffney, kudos to him. He actually worked with the Barlow Townhome folks, and they actually built the sidewalk on the Park Village property to get it from their property to the driveway, or almost to the driveway. And so that missing critical piece is actually in place. And so in terms of prioritizing other projects, we are looking at deprioritizing this one slightly, since that essentially is connected just on the existing driveway at this point, whereas we weren't sure about how that was going to happen otherwise. And similar, I do know that the Ives Pool exterior shower, which is not proposed to be funded through park funds, but through the Building Infrastructure Reserve Fund. The engineering is pushing that one out as well. And so there are a couple of updates just based on workflow of some of these. And so what we're doing tonight is just a check-in before I submit the budget. It then goes to the budget subcommittee, which is this year is Councilmember Zolman and Vice Chair Rich. They'll go through and talk about all the capital improvements, not just parks, but streets, sewer, water, everything, and give their as well as the city department budgets. Then they give their recommendations to city council, and city council discusses it at a whole and adopts it in the sort of May-June timeframe. So you guys will see this once council has had their first hearing on the capital improvement plan. You will see all of those projects coming back to you for a general plan consistency. If you recall that last kind of June or so, we did that to have a hearing on that. So you'll see what the final council recommendation is for the parks projects, as well as all of the other capital projects in town for the late June.
Great, thank you. And going to commissioner questions for staff. Do have a question on, so for example, you just mentioned the Ives Pool exterior shower, and looking at the budget showing that 75,000 of it is unfunded at this point. So how do you determine when, so for example, let's say you spend the money for pre-design and whatever to get it prepped, and then if you don't get the rest of it funded, does that design kind of get expired and then you have to do a new one down the road? How do you determine what to move forward with, as far as especially particularly with items that are, say, not completely funded?
Sure. So sometimes, like with so there's maybe kind of two different kinds of projects. With the shower is kind of probably I'll say a smaller one, smaller in that it's at $100,000. It's not for a city budget. It's not that huge. It's not the Calder Creek restoration, which is a multi-million-dollar project. So sort of the funding is kind of foreseeable. So in this case, we do actually have I believe we do have this money in the in the reserves. So for a smaller project like this, you would probably, it's okay to do the design knowing that you're going to be able to, once that design is done, you're going to be able to fund it in the next year or so. And sometimes that is like the Burbank Farms. Once that's, they started the design, and then they did need to hire an architect who's doing the work now. While they were doing that work on that, they actually went after and got applied for a community development block grant to do that restroom, which was awarded. And so you kind of start to, our jobs as staff and the city grant writers to start to identify funding sources for some of these. And if we can do it without the park fund, that's always helpful. So like the Ives Park exterior shower, I spoke with folks at the Community Development Commission, since the thought was this would potentially be available for homeless folks with tokens to come and get showers. So is that a funding source? There, in speaking with them, there aren't any funding sources at the county level for that. I think this is one that, because it's not in the master plan, it's a little bit more maybe questionable. And I know this commission has recommended that this not be funded with parks money, which is actually why it's the funding that is identified for it is not in the parks funding. Try to help protect our limited dollars there. The larger projects like the Calder Creek, yes, you do have to get to a certain level before you can go out for grants. So you do have to spend some money up front. And that's what CUSP is trying to help us with. And I think Barry Bergman just actually talked in his presentation a little bit about the Caltrans grant would get you to about 30% design. It's basically you've gotten to the point where it's realistic. You haven't worked out all the construction details, but it's enough that you have the feasibility and some of the general design done for that, the community participation and the vote of confidence from the city council. And so that's kind of where we're at with the Calder Creek project. We know we don't have funding for it. We're going to have to go after grant money. We have a few ideas of where that money could come from. But we need to do this initial work, which is what CUSP is trying to get us dollars for right now. And so that's kind of like the really big projects, how you tend to do those. And sometimes like the Ives Park master plan, it is a long time and you do end up doing some updates. And yes, there is a trick of not doing a bunch of design work that's just going to get changed in a few years. I also, the AmeriCorps Trail is one where they probably didn't do quite enough design before submitting for the grant, which is why it's taken a little bit more time. They hadn't worked out some of the details, like the original bridge would have required some really large cranes, which would have required tree removal, which is of course not what you're trying to do in the Laguna Preserve. And so our city engineer has been working with the surveyor and civil engineer, and they've actually found a different design that is a pre-manufactured bridge. It's a little bit easier to get in and less invasive. And so that's part of the design process. You end up flushing out once you get some of these grants or funding going. Does that address your question?
Yeah. And I know it's not a big, say the shower is not a big expenditure city-wise, but for a shower, it seems pretty, it is a big expense. And then just a question on, I made this comment before, I don't know if it's realistic, to consider maybe in the future that putting together budgets to take considerations as to what impact it would have on future maintenance. Maybe it reduces maintenance, maybe it increases, and just to have an idea of what resources we're kind of committing to in the future. Because usually it's, we have the budget, this is what's going to cost to build, and then it kind of stops right there. But I know it generates additional maintenance down the road, and just to kind of address it, whether anything is done about it or acknowledged or not, at least to kind of add something to it. I don't know if that's something that could be helpful, realistic. Is that a pipe dream?
I think it is, and actually, I think it might be in our general plan to make sure that we're doing that. So I think that's a very good point. And I will say, I spent a decade doing public architecture only, planning and architecture, but it was all public facilities, park facilities, and there's definitely a component of like what kinds of surfaces you use and how, what kind of materials, in terms of they might be more expensive up front, but from a maintenance standpoint, they're a lot easier to take care of. For instance, again, with the AmeriCorps Trail, one of the options was to do decomposed granite. And I said, you know what? Nope, that's going to be a maintenance, that our building official knows that it's really difficult to keep the ADA access. If the area floods, all that granite, decomposed granite, is just going to wash out, and it's going to be a maintenance nightmare. As much as that would be a lovely trail aesthetically, we really need a harder surface so that we need a surface that's going to not cause us maintenance nightmares and costs in the future. So that's definitely something that I know Dante is really good at, because that's the guy who maintains it. That's why we don't just build it without his input. But that's definitely a critical factor. And in fact, actually, one of the things which I passed over in my report is Dante does have in his maintenance budget $25,000, I believe it is, to replace the Libby Park pond fence. And that is something actually where, my bad, and I'm happy to back down, suggested, well, why do we need to replace the fence? Why can't we just remove it? We heard loud and clear, given the preschool and the smaller kids there, that they want a fence of some kind. We are looking to work with the Rotary, so he has the money to buy more upgraded materials from Chain Link if the Rotary helps build it. And so that is actually a partnership we're looking at doing, but doing that this fiscal year, so in the next couple of months. And so we'll probably have that on a future agenda. And if there's a subcommittee of folks here tonight who are interested in working on that, I'd really appreciate your help with that, because I think that would help get that going. And get kind of that, but yeah, that's the other component. Do we need that or not? as elements.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Ottinger, welcome, and your question. You're muted.
I was looking at the South Main Street parklet, and the description says develop design features for a parklet in the downtown area. Is that particular to this site, or if we develop components, styles, features, materials, would those same design elements be used at a future parklet at another site? For instance, the one in front of Mimi's Ice Cream, if that came to be, or is this just for this site, the design element feature?
Sure. So the city is actually handling this in a twofold approach. Right now, we are actually working on design guidelines for parklets. So this is what, not just for Caltrans Street, but for city streets too. So if someone wanted to do something on Burnett Street or Walker, something like that, there are design guidelines of what those should be, and people can actually propose them, and it would be reviewed just like residential design guidelines or commercial design guidelines by the design review board. We actually had one meeting on those design guidelines with our design guidelines subcommittee that Vice Chair Fritz is on. We have a second meeting scheduled end of February, and then those design guidelines. So that's not a particular design, but it's what it should look like, parameters and all that kind of stuff. That'll be going to council, I think, late March. We did adjust that because we wanted to go back to the design guidelines subcommittee for that one. That would then be coming to the Planning Commission, I believe, as well. For final review and adoption for you guys to all see. I'm not sure if, because it's design guidelines, it'll get the design guideline group sign off. Then the second component of this is, and so that's why the design work cost is almost as much as the parklet in here, right? Because it's kind of that more comprehensive approach. And then the actual construction of the one would be for that one particular location.
Okay.
And the idea is that they could, you know, maybe it might have some of the same elements, but you could vary them so they don't all look the same. And again, to note that is, even though it's in the park project, it is because of kind of it's a parklet. It is being funded through the building and facility fund.
Any other questions from commissioners? All right, I will go ahead and open up for public comment. If you have a public comment, limit to 3 minutes.
We have
Carrie,
not received any, and we do not have any members of the public here at this point.
Okay. And I will close public comment and bring it back to commissioners. And Carrie, what are you looking for on here? Just additional comments? Do we need to approve this, or where are we at with that?
It would be helpful to get any input for us to bring forward, like you've given in the past. That's been very helpful. And to know if you concur with staff recommendations so that I can finalize this and submit it this week.
Okay.
And so that could be a motion.
Okay, so open for comments, questions, or motions. Good. Well,
I guess I'll just say I think it looks all reasonable. I mean, there's most of these projects we've seen in some capacity previously, and it's good to see they're just kind of moving forward through the process. And glad to see that some of these have money to move forward. It's always nice to get projects underway or completed or whatever. I don't really have any comments or things that I would suggest changing at this point. So I'm happy to make a motion to approve the park budget for fiscal year or next fiscal year as presented to us.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have the first and a second. And Carrie, do you have anything to add to the motion as far as any particular comments, or just we can just do in general?
Yeah, no, so this is just it's the city council will do the official approval stuff, but this is just supporting staff's recommendations.
Yeah, okay. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, and I'd go ahead and call for the vote.
Okay, Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.
Commissioner Burns?
Yes.
Commissioner Ottinger?
Yes.
Vice Chair Fritz?
Yes.
And Chair Fernandez?
Aye.
Thank you all. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you for all the work on that.
And I promise next year will be more exciting.
All right, looking forward to that. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 8, so any subcommittee updates. Okay, and if not, we will go on to item number 9, Planning Director's Report, 9A, Public Meeting Update, and then you can move into the also 9B of liaison list.
Thank you. So I did want to give an update, and the City Council February 7th did discuss the future of public meetings. So as we have discussed here before, assuming the governor does not extend the emergency, the COVID emergency will be ending February 28th. Which means that we will be required to go back to either all in-person or hybrid with the commission and facilitating staff in person, and the public able to join, and other staff or consultants able to join remotely via Zoom. The council did give direction to go forward with the hybrid. And certainly they had public comments that were definitely wanting that because of the ability to engage in our public forums much more easily. And so the general direction from council was to be as progressive as you can in terms of allowing hybrid. And so they did denote that they were in support of that. However, we will need to, and I did include some of the details here in terms of how that works for you all as planning commissioners. We will be going back to the youth annex. We'll be asking them to space tables as much as they can in terms of the dais for in-person meetings. The community center will be facilitating the Zoom, so each of you will be. So basically, what happens is that one window is the meeting room, and other windows are and they pan back and forth between whoever's speaking or the presenter, just like you kind of do on Zoom and see highlighted if you're in the speaker view. And then all of the public would still be up on a screen so you can see them. And if they're speaking, then they're sort of the gallery view, and you can see and interact with them that way. So that is the gist of it. I will note we are going to be changing our design review, public art committee, and climate action committee meetings, just because those are all on Wednesdays, and the youth annex isn't available on Wednesdays, but we are looking to change them all to be Tuesdays. And so that'll be kind of meeting day for me and John. Which is fine. It's in some ways it might actually be kind of nice to just hang out at the community center for a while. There are a couple of Brown Act provisions that you can prevail yourself, and I know I talked about these last time. I'll just briefly talk about them. They're detailed in the staff report, and then we can get into any questions or discussions on this, because I anticipate there's questions. There are two different types of Brown Act provisions that one can use. The first one, which is, and I'm just going to share my screen here and kind of zoom in a little bit on this so you can read this. So there are during COVID, the state legislature did adopt some updates called the particular bill was 82449, which allow for remote participation in a meeting by a member of a legislative body, which Planning Commission is a legislative body, because of just cause. And so those are the just causes are sort of below here. The obvious one is I have COVID, please don't come into the meeting, let me know and we'll get your remote. No one wants that. That's kind of the intent of this. Or if you're doing caregiving for a parent, child, or another close family member, you need to because of a physical or mental disability. Although I will note this is supposedly capped at 2 meetings per year for you, so it's more limited. You can also use the just cause if you're out of town and traveling. Staff, we will be required at the beginning of a meeting, if anyone is remote, to ask you why, if it's you're using the just cause, and you don't need to disclose your whole circumstance, but we're working with the city clerk on whatever script will need to be read for that. Staff will be basically taking a role in making sure that people aren't going over their limits on how they're participating. We do always have to have a quorum of 3 physically present in the meeting room. And otherwise you could have a meeting, but you don't technically have a quorum. Additionally, say you are out of town for that 3rd meeting. Well, there's a couple of provisions, but you can also attend as a member of the public, just not a voting member if you're exceeding your just cause numbers. So that's kind of that provision. That's a new one. The other is let's see, sort of going under. There are some requirements if you're using that, and one is that you must participate both audio and visual. So if you're via Zoom, then you have to be able to have your video on and be able to speak. And then, yes, then no more than two members of the body can utilize the same teleconference provisions at the same time. So definitely you'll need to let me know in advance as much as you can if you're going to be out of town and you know it, or if you're going to be caring for someone and need to take advantage of this. And so that's 20% of the meetings, which works out to, since we cancel 1 or 2 meetings around the holidays, it's 2.2 meetings or 2 meetings a year. There are some other provisions that we can get into. The other option is the traditional Brown Act, which is not limited, but it's a little bit more restrictive in that it needs to be, it's basically a satellite location. So you can still do it, say you're out on town on travel, you can notice your hotel room or conference room, as a meeting location. If someone shows up, you have to actually let them in and they have to be able to participate in the meeting from that location. And that location needs to be known far enough in advance that we as staff can include it as the meeting location on the meeting agenda. And you have to have a way for any public to participate. Now, I know that there are council members who have used this provision when they're out of town, and no one's ever actually come to their hotel room. But obviously, if someone were to show up, someone goes off to Hawaii, John might show up as a member of the public and ask to be there. But so that is a traditional teleconference model, and this is one where like I'm on meetings, and so if you have an office and you want to do a tradition office or another kind of public place where you have it set up and you want a teleconference in there from the traditional Brown Act, I would ask. Sorry, it looks like Debbie needs to leave, so let me just. Let's have a side conversation so I can make sure that we have everything in order for that. I think I'll stop there and ask questions.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. When you were talking about just cause and travel, that it says travel while on business of the legislative body or another state or local agency. So it's not just you're on vacation traveling, right?
Correct. Right. Yes, and so that would be you're down at a planning commissioner conference or something like that. Okay, thank you. I missed that one. But say if you're traveling to care for a parent or something, that would certainly constitute the just cause.
Okay. Any other questions, clarification? Do we need to open this for public comment, or this is just for our information, right? Yeah, this is for your information. This will be starting at your March 8th meeting, so we'll have one more in-person or one more remote meeting. Sorry, I forgot to mention that this starts the March 7th. Thank you, John. He's laughing at me in the background. March 7th. So your February 28th, you'll probably be the last meeting in California to be fully remote. So just remind everybody on their calendars in person. So yes, and I'll remind you at the next meeting and when we send out the agenda for the 7th. So Kathy.
Was there any discussion with staff regarding providing digital media for people so that we don't need to have paper packets?
There has not been, although they're at the council level. However, John and I have discussed this, and we were thinking about that. I do have some money in my budget that can be utilized for that. They would be, the idea would be, because we have actually 3 boards with 5 people on it, that we would have one set of 5 tablets or something that can be set up so that you can continue to scan the documents and things like that in place of going back to printing out all the packets, because that's obviously wasteful from a sustainability perspective, but it is also time intensive for staff as well to put all those packets together.
I mark up my documents and have my comments in a little comment box so I can review them while people are talking. Would I be able to download my own documents to that laptop with a thumb drive or something?
That's a good question. So that we haven't purchased anything yet. This is just an idea. So the elements that you would need, such as that, is some way to either email them to yourself or bring them on a thumb drive and be able to download them. That makes a lot of sense as an element.
Or just buy a small laptop to take on vacations and whatnot. Have it.
Right, right. And you can certainly bring in your own computer as well if you want to. That is fine. And so that's but just knowing that not everyone is gonna have that. The only thing that we will need to ask is that you mute the microphone on your laptop and not log on to Zoom, because you're going to be on the regular, individual microphones that the community center has. And so the sound will be done professionally in that way, which will be kind of nice.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if there is like any indication of like, yeah, well, I'm just gonna bring my laptop or whatever, definitely speak up so we can kind of figure that out. Or if you're, if you'd like to have something available for you electronically there that you can do, just Kathy, what you said.
Yeah, I would plan to either bring a laptop or a pad, iPad. So.
Yeah, I'll probably bring my own tablet with me, I think, just so I can have my own notes and stuff easier.
Sure. Okay, and I can send out an email as well, just kind of making sure we catch everyone on that one.
Carrie, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Kelly?
In terms of the setup of the youth annex, so what kind of a ventilation system is in place? And I know it's not going to be a mask required anymore, but and I know if I wore a mask that I legally can do that at a public meeting, and that's why we have to take a roll call vote. Is for
correct.
But what accommodations does a youth annex have? I mean, I know it's got air conditioning and heating, but what kind of ventilation system to help us all out? Is there a HEPA filter? What's going on?
I can check on that. And I think you asked me this last time, and I think I forgot to ask, and there were so many other logistics about the meeting when we met with them at the community center going on. But I will ask, and yes, you're certainly able to wear a mask. I know they do also have doors to the outside to a deck, which we could certainly ask them to open as well, but I will find out what kind of ventilation system and filtration they have. I do think they have upgraded some of that. I know some of the city buildings have as well since the start of COVID, but I'm not exactly sure where they're at with it.
Okay, just that's sort of a for me personally, I don't attend public meetings, and I never have. Work was quite enough, thank you. And I have to feel totally confident that we're being protected as best we can. I mean, at Memorial, what we did to make the COVID rooms work is they did a retrofitting of just a regular, large filtering system, a home unit, and directed it so it goes outdoors. And so they replaced the windows in each one of our rooms, and it was just, I said, is this legal? You're just jimmy rigging this together, and apparently it was. So, So that's just for your information, but I'm still not convinced how this is going to work for me personally.
Okay.
And, you know, I'd like to ask commissioners to look ahead in their calendars for the remainder of the year. And if you know you have vacations or trips coming up, you know, we're not used to, you know, being as concerned lately because, you know, if I'm on a trip, I know that I can log in and do that, but it's going to be a little more restrictive. So just kind of think ahead and, you know, let Carrie know as much ahead of time as possible.
Yeah, that will be very helpful.
Okay.
You know, Sonoma County got, we're in a unfortunate situation where our numbers are going back up. Fortunately, it's not as serious, but the new Omicron variant that is spreading around, you know, we're not over with this yet. And and the public is so done with it all, and there'll be people who probably won't wear masks. And I still think that we have an obligation to provide safety for us and for the public. And
Sure.
so, I mean, to me, this is like so important that I'm hoping that everyone is thinking about this for the council as well, and you know, whatever other boards and commissions have to change their schedules around and such. A very stressful time for a lot of people to, you know, be opening up further. I just want to make sure that our city does the right thing.
Thank you, Linda. And you are certainly not the first person that I've heard those pretty much same comments from. I think the things that we can do, I'll just put this out there, is we can, I will ask the community center to space the dais so that there's as much space as possible between us. Obviously, with 5 commissioners instead of 8, that will be a lot easier to do. But I'll make sure they do that, and then also make sure that the public seats are backed up enough that there's as much space as we can give. We don't generally need the 40 chairs that the city council needs set up, and so that will certainly be easier. We can also have masks available at the back of the room and encourage folks. And I don't know if we as a group want to be, you know, okay just wearing masks for the safety of others. I would be fine to doing that myself. I generally do wear a mask in public, so knowing that there's folks concerned on this body.
Gary, I'm wondering if the community center doesn't, you know, have, you know, a HEPA filter, whatever the filtration system is. I wonder if the city would, you know, purchase some of those, you know, just kind of portable units to use in
That's
the
actually
meetings that we could scatter around.
Yeah, we do actually have a couple at City Hall. So that, I mean, I'm saying going back and forth, but they're also not that expensive. They're, you know,
Yeah,
in terms of a public meeting. So let me talk with the community center and see what they have, if they don't have the full system, and if that would be
that'd be
possible.
a good idea. And I'm probably I'll probably wear a mask in the meeting, so just because.
Well, sorry to interrupt. So the mask situation again, you know, it needs to be the highest quality, the N95s, the 90s, as well. Surgical masks provide some protection, but not as much, certainly as, you know, the N95s, etc. And I know it's going to be, if the city wants to provide those, it's going to be an expensive thing. So I'm not quite sure, you know, for the public, how we can maybe have a sign that says, please wear N95s in the future or something, you know, like that. Because, you know, we don't want to do stuff that's not going to make any difference.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Oh, a question about the amount of meetings I saw for, there's the 2 that are allowed for the, wait, let me pull it back up here. For the just cause, but it says a total of 4. So what does that mean? That you could have an emergency and have up to 4 emergencies if you don't use up any of your just cause? Is that sort of how you're reading that?
So the way I'm reading that is the just cause, which is the contagious illness or caregiver, is limited to 2 meetings per year, regardless of the factors, but you can also do another 2 to get to that 4 for emergency circumstances, which is, and I'm not sure what the difference is here, defined as a physical or family medical emergency, which to me, if you or someone in your house has COVID, that's that frankly, to me, that would be enough to say, let's just have some common sense here. And so that's where that 4 meeting come from. And again, I can try to get a little bit of clarification on that.
And then one last question about is somehow at the city council meeting, I heard someone mention there was also another way if you were doing an accommodation. Do you know what that discussion was about, or did you hear that?
I did not hear that. I do know that I've had a quick conversation with our city attorney about potential ADA accommodation circumstances.
Yeah.
So I think you can use, if you have that issue, what normally happens pre-COVID is this: you're asked to contact with your member of the commission or the public to contact city staff, specifically actually the city clerk and the building official, to make sure that there are accommodations for you at that meeting. I do know that next Tuesday, council will be asked to update that policy, just to clarify that as we go back to in-person, and that is going to affect a number of people. The accommodation of doing a meeting remote, I have been told, is likely not the solution to those things. So physical disability is usually that you have a ADA accessible facility, visual accommodations or alternative means of having the materials. Hearing accommodations are usually a sign language or closed captioning, not that you are doing the meeting from somewhere else. But if any of you have questions about this and want to discuss online, please contact me directly, or the city clerk, Mary Gorley. But if you feel more comfortable talking to me, please definitely. I am an advocate of universal access, and I don't think this should be stopping people from participating in meetings, frankly. So,
and Carrie, could you just clarify something that I'm just going to read? So on the page 3, where it goes through and starts out, overall, a member may participate in meetings. You see that? So after the bullet points, it says any teleconference attendance that is fully noticed under traditional Brown Act teleconference requirements would not count against the maximum number of meetings that may be attended remotely. So I'm not sure I understand.
Correct. So that is the traditional Brown Act is your address is going to be noticed on the printed agenda. Okay. And you are saying that you are opening up your whatever that address is, hotel room, home, whatever, to the public as a satellite location.
Okay, so that's
so like I have meetings in Santa Rosa. I may very well say, hey, I'm going to do this from the city office, City Hall of Sebastopol, post that on the notice as a traditional Brown Act location. And if anyone wants to come into my office and join me for the meeting, fine, that's great.
Okay, so that, yeah, and I know you mentioned that in the beginning, but it didn't quite make sense until just, now when I
Yeah.
read. So,
It's very complicated. It's
So,
and I don't have all the answers
Right,
yet
right,
either.
okay.
So
Yeah, that would be good to clarify because, how do we, if I'm going to be gone and I want to participate, what steps do I need to make sure and cover and what time in order to be able to do that?
right, and so that I think definitely you can utilize the traditional Brown Act.
Yeah.
As long as you're willing to disclose your location.
Okay.
And that's actually basically what was the rule before the COVID emergency is that's what it's called the traditional Brown Act, is that you could do that, but you had to disclose your location. So of course, people who are volunteers or staff or whatever don't necessarily want to give out their home address. So with COVID, you do not have to do that. With the emergency regulations, you still don't have to do that. However, if you want to go beyond that or outside of those, then you would need to do that.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks for clarifying that.
All right. Any other questions on that? Let's see why I put it on as an actual agenda note. So that it's going to be basically an agenda item. All right. So the other item I have for my report tonight is the 2023 liaison list. And that is available. And so that is one where, and just to note, the council was very encouraging of people who are, say, your planning commission liaison, being there remotely via Zoom is not a problem for them at all. Same with staff who aren't facilitating the meeting. So like when I'm presenting at city council meetings or things like that, or consultants and things like that. So the Brown Act is limited to really the committee members or the actual commission members. So we did include a draft list liaison schedule for the year. And so if you could take a look at that and let me know, probably be via email is the best way if there are times when I mean, we have a backup either way, but if you're assigned to a month and you're going to be out of the country for the whole month, if you could just let me know and we can just rejigger that a little bit. Okay. And then if there are no questions on that, we have a couple of other items just in the general planning director's report. Let's see, actually, John, I don't know if you have any items you want to discuss. I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. You haven't done there any reports. Okay, so I'll start.
I don't think so. We did have our 3rd out of 4 facade improvement grant awardees go out on the 1st of February. We only had 2, and we have 1 more coming up in March. So we still have a little bit of funds left over. So if you know anybody that is a business located in Sebastopol that needs some facade improvements, please let them know. And that information is on the city's website under special programs. So I think that's about it.
Can you talk about the DRB interviews and new members?
Oh, yes. So the city council did the DRB interview and appointments at their last meeting. We had 3 interviews. 2 of them were reappointments. That was Marshall Balf as the alternate and Carrie Bush as a licensed architect. And then we also had Lynn Dietler reappointed to the design review board, taking Ted Luthen's position as category B, I believe it is. So we will be having kind of our first reappointment meeting tomorrow afternoon. And we will also be discussing schedule changes for the upcoming meetings going forward when we go back to in-person at the youth annex. So since Wednesday is our normal meeting date and the youth annex doesn't have times available, we're looking at, as Carrie mentioned earlier, doing kind of a all-day Tuesday event with the DRB.
Thank you. And yes, and so Ted, after many years, at least longer than I've been with the city, is retiring from the DRB. So we will be doing a certificate for him at council soon. To appreciate that. We also had, they also did interviews for the Climate Action Committee. They reappointed Joshua Solomone, who's one of the co-chairs, and Alex Goodman, who also reapplied. And then we also received two other new appointees. One is Zeno Swinchik. I'm learning how to pronounce that name. He has been actually a member of one of the working groups for the Climate Action Committee since its inception, and so he's stepping up as a full committee member now, as well as Emmett Hopkins, who's another new member. So, again, I'll be probably meeting the afternoon before the Planning Commission meetings, so you may see them in passing. We do have a couple items. We also had at the last Tuesday City Council meeting a really nice presentation by our chair of our Public Art Committee, Margie Mills-Lyson, on sort of a little bit of the history and recent projects for that. So if you're interested, that's actually, she did a great job on that. And at that meeting, council approved the location at the Joe Rodetta Trail start on the east side of Petaluma Avenue as the next art location. So our next step for that is for the PAC to put together a call for artists. It will be about a $30,000 commission, so on par with the Micro Magnus on the library wall kind of scale. And also working with regional parks, who the county of Sonoma owns that land, working with them to get formal approval before we issue that call. So that's the next few months of that group. The council did also discuss and appointed 2 council members to be on an ad hoc committee regarding fire services. And I believe that is Councilmember Maurer and Councilmember McLewis. That was very late at night. It was like a 12:30 end date. So I might not have the signees right yet, but they did actually have that going on as well. And so that will actually be coming back to council fairly soon. It's a 30 or 60 day or so work that they've been asked to do, to include looking at not only consolidation, but what a sort of there's a staffing model where it's not a full-time, but it's a 2 shifts per day, which is sort of the interim idea that people had been looking at until we could get a renovation of our fire station. Even if we consolidated, that we would need to go to something like that. And so they are, that's one of the things they were asked to look at. And then some of the funding sources as well. One of the things that came up in the council meeting for that is if we were to consolidate into Gold Ridge, we would be part of their special district, annexed to them, just like someone gets annexed to the city, any city taxes they have to pay. With Gold Ridge, there is a parcel tax. And so one of the things that came up was, well, is that something that Sebastopol we could do for ourselves and tax ourselves and keep that control local? And so that's some of the dynamics that group will be looking at, and the council will be discussing in the next months, I'm sure. So then on to and they did also approve the Little League lease that was on the consent calendar for that lease renewal, an update that I had shared with you previously. February 21st, they will be doing mid-year budget discussions, and one of those is also looking at the first phase of the staffing assessment that the city had done, and so that'll be kind of probably the big item next Tuesday. They'll also be looking at approving the plans and authorizing bidding for the Bodega Avenue phase 1, which is up to Nelson, I think, that project. And so that's probably going to be happening this summer in terms of the big construction there. And I think that's about it for city meetings going on.
Any questions? Commissioners? Okay, I think we're good. So I'd like to adjourn the meeting to our next regular meeting, to be held virtually still on February 28th, 2023 at 6 p.m. And hereby adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for being here.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.